In this video, we're going to cover the standard toolbar for OpenOffice Writer. The standard toolbar contains many of the most commonly used functions inside of OpenOffice, so it's very good to know what each icon does on the bar. We'll be covering each icon in some detail today so that you can get a grasp on that. To start off with the first three icons, we have New, Open, and Save. These icons work exactly as the options from the File menu. If you were to go to the New File menu and Text Document, that is the Control-N shortcut, which does exactly the same thing as the New icon on the toolbar, which would just start a blank new standard OpenOffice Writer document. Now you will notice, and I should mention this now, that on the New tab for File New, there are actually different types of files which you can open up inside of OpenOffice Writer. These first four after text document are actually specific to Calc and other OpenOffice Suite products. They aren't specific to OpenOffice Writer, so we're not going to be covering them in these tutorials, but they are definitely something you can take a look at yourself if you're interested. Below that are other types of documents like HTML and XML, which would usually refer to different kinds of content that may be going on the web. Further below that, we have Formula, which actually refers to mathematical formulas made in OpenOffice Math, and Labels and Business Cards and other templates, which would be for very specific different types of documents, such as shipping labels, business cards obviously, and then Templates and Documents. You open that up and you will get this dialog box, which would allow you to access any templates you actually had stored on your computer, but by default, OpenOffice doesn't have any templates. So what you actually need to do if you want to install a template which can basically set up a document to already have it partially made before you even start writing is to click on Get More Templates Online. And this will open up the website, openoffice.org, where they have templates and services already here ready for you to download and use within OpenOffice should you choose, such as calendars, invoices, and other business card templates. The Open button on the toolbar just opens up the Open dialog where you can open up new documents. Next, you'll notice that the Save function is grayed out currently, and that's because this file has actually already been saved to the computer. If we wanted to save something new, we'd have to add new information to the document. For instance, if I put a couple letters here, you'll see this turn blue. Now, the Save function works exactly the same as going to File, Save, or hitting Control-S on your keyboard. If you've already saved the file somewhere on the computer, as I did, if I hit Control-S, like this, it's going to actually overwrite what was previously there in the file. Now, of course, we can just undo that while we're still working within OpenOffice Writer, but if you save and then quit, anything is going to be overwritten that was previously saved to that file if you use the Save functionality again. Next, we have Document as Email. Now what this does is it will immediately take what you're currently working on, put it as a .odt attachment inside of the email application of your choice, which is going to actually be the default one on your computer. You can set that to be a program like Outlook or Thunderbird. Those are two very popular choices, but you cannot do it within OpenOffice Writer. For instance, on Windows, you would need to go to the control panel and look for the default programs. And from there, you can set Thunderbird as the default mailing program, and bam, when you hit the button inside of OpenOffice, it's going to open up Thunderbird. So once you have your default program set inside of your operating system, hitting this button will open up a brand new email inside of the emailing application of your choice using the default email address, and it will have the file as an attachment as you see there. Then you just need to write your email as normal, and it's a very quick way to include documents inside of an email. The next icon, Edit File, will only be selectable if you've actually saved the document somewhere on your computer. When you toggle Edit File on, you can type your text into break. Now the next icon, Edit File, will only be selectable if you have actually saved your document somewhere on your computer. When Edit File is toggled on, you're able to edit your document as normal. When you toggle it off, you can't actually change anything within the document. Like if I try to select somewhere and type some text, it does not work. So in order to edit your document, Edit File must be enabled on. If you're ever in a circumstance where for some reason you can't edit, maybe you open the file in read-only mode, that's another possibility. You can click Edit File, and you'll be able to work as normal. Now, specifically in the case of working with a read-only file, you won't actually be able to overwrite the original file because it has a lock on it. So if you're going to save a file that you started editing within read-only mode, you have to save it to a new location. We can also export our document as a PDF file straight inside of OpenOffice Writer, which is quite useful because PDF is a common and very, very popular format that you can actually use. So if you want to export as PDF, you simply need to click on the icon on your toolbar, give it a file name, and the file type is already selected, so just choose a location and hit save, and you'll have it as a PDF. You can also print to your printer very quickly from the toolbar by hitting the Print File Directly icon to the right of Export PDF. Now, when you hit this, it's going to print to your default printer using the standard settings you already have all set up. It's not going to give you a dialog for anything. It's just going to print straight there very quickly, no pop-ups or anything. So make sure you have the right printer set. That's one thing. And secondly, make sure that you don't need custom settings. If you do need to customize your settings, like changing which pages you want to print, it's better to go to File and then Print instead, because then you get the dialog where you can change the settings. As I mentioned in the last video, it's a very smart idea to use Page Preview before you actually print. Page Preview will show you what your document will actually look like when it prints out to paper using the paper size you have selected for the document, and it gives you the Page Preview toolbar, which we briefly talked about in the last video. The spelling and grammar dialog box can be opened from the toolbar as well. Alternatively, you can hit F7. And what this will do is spell check your document. It also does grammar. And you can change text. You can add in new words to the dictionary. And you can ignore and skip over certain words if you know it's actually spelled correctly, and you don't want the program to change it. Right next to spelling and grammar is auto spell check. And auto spell check is the function of OpenOffice Writer enabled by default, which will underline any words you have misspelled. As you can see here, I put ASDF, not a real word, so it puts a red underline to that. But if I was to toggle it off, then auto spell check would no longer be functioning, so the red line would disappear and I wouldn't be able to see straight on my document which words I had incorrectly spelled. Next, we have the classic cut, copy, and paste functionality. So for instance, we could select a portion of text that we wanted to cut and move to somewhere else, hit cut, and it will remove it from the page and temporarily store it in memory where we can paste it somewhere else. We can paste it multiple times if we want as well. The difference between copy and cut is that copy puts a copy in memory, but without taking it off the document. So if we hit Control-C or clicking on the toolbar icon to copy, we can go down another line and paste that same word again and again and again. Very useful tool, especially if you're going to be repeatedly putting the same information into a document over and over again. Or if you want to send the same information over to a different document in another program, because cut, copy, and paste usually work across almost all applications. Next, we have the Format Paintbrush, and what this does is allow you to take the formatting or the text style of one block of text and copy it over to another. As you can see down here, the formatting between this paintbrush word and format are different, but what I'm going to do is using the Format Paintbrush, I'm going to take the paintbrush formatting and copy it over to format. So in order to do that, click where you want to copy the formatting from. You can just be in the paragraph. You don't even have to select the whole thing. As long as you're clicking over it and you have the cursor set, that's good enough. So click Format Paintbrush and then paint or click where you want to copy that formatting to. So right there, and I could also copy it again over to the standard toolbar. It's a nice tool if you want to make two things look identical without having to play around with them any more than a few button clicks. Now, if we wanted to undo those changes, we could go to the Edit menu and do Undo if we wanted to undo a change, and then Redo if we decided we wanted that change after all. However, Undo and Redo are also on the standard toolbars, so we can undo a recent change just by clicking on the toolbar here to change it back to the previous setting. And if we decide after all that we did want to keep the new setting, we can just hit Redo to redo whatever changes we just applied again and again and again until we run out of changes to do. Now, if you're writing a document that's going to be tying a lot of links into the web, one icon you are going to need to know about is Hyperlink. Now, Hyperlink will take your currently selected text and allow you to add a URL, which could be to a document you have on your network, or it could be to an actual web address, by opening up the Hyperlink dialog box. So, for instance, if we wanted to make that word format send to Google, all we would need to do is type in the web address for Google, www.google.com, hit apply, and this also works with FTP and Telnet links for the technologically savvy. So once you have your address set in the target box, you can go down here and change the text that you want to display for that hyperlink, which by default is what you already had selected. And this is going to be the text that actually shows on your document. And then for other locations where this hyperlink may be referenced within OpenOffice, you can set a name. And this will be the background name for it, not what actually displays in the document. So once you have that set, just hit apply. And you're good to go. Now we have a hyperlink straight to Google from here, which if you're opening a hyperlink inside of OpenOffice document, you would hit Control and then left click on the hyperlink. And you know it's going to go to the hyperlink when you left click because you'll get this little hand icon that hovers over the hyperlink. Now, if you like spreadsheets, you don't have to necessarily do spreadsheets in OpenOffice Calc. You can actually add in tables straight inside of OpenOffice Writer. And you can do that by hitting either Control F12 or by left clicking on the table icon here. And when you left click this, it'll immediately give you this pop-up. It looks like a grid. And what this is actually doing is asking you basically how many rows and how many columns do you want on your table. So if we wanted a 3x3 column, we just drag over here until it's 3 across and 3 tall. Then we left click and it will immediately create a simple table for us with 3 columns and 3 rows, a total of 9 cells that we can edit and manipulate within OpenOffice Writer. Now, there's a lot that goes into tables inside of OpenOffice Writer, and we'll be covering that more in a future video. Now, you may not know this, but OpenOffice Writer actually has some functions for being able to draw straight onto your document, and you can actually enable those by hitting this Show Draw Functions button. And then at the bottom of your screen, you're going to get a new toolbar for all of the options for drawing shapes and lines and text within OpenOffice. Now, text is going to be a little different than just typing text normally because you actually create text boxes. If you've ever used a program like Microsoft Paint, you kind of know where this is coming from. And the nice thing about these draw functions is that they aren't bound by the formatting rules of your page and your document. So essentially you have full control over any of these shapes and where you put them in your document and how they're going to look. Now, what I will say is that OpenOffice Writer is definitely not an art program, but having these little shapes sometimes is good for certain documents. Next up, we have the standard toolbar icon for find and replace. Next up, we have the standard toolbar icon to open up the find and replace dialog, which you can also access by hitting Control F. Find and replace, as we previously discussed, allows you to search for different words or phrases inside of your OpenOffice document, find each instance being able to go down the list, and to replace any of those instances of the word or phrase that you want with new text, which is very useful if there was a key word you had in your document that you decided you wanted to change to something else, for one instance. Next, we have the button to open up the Navigator, which can also be accessed with F5. And what the Navigator does is allow you to see all the different elements inside of your document. It won't display text paragraphs, but it will include headings, tables, graphics, and many other different types of items that you may have included within your OpenOffice document. What's useful about this is that you can essentially navigate to the different elements that are major in your document that you may need to play around with or edit. For instance, if I create a heading by typing in some text and hitting Control-1 to apply the heading style to that paragraph, then I can go back to the Navigator and I'll actually be able to see the heading as a selectable option here. And if I was to click heading, let's create another page, then it will immediately take me straight to the heading inside of the document. So it's a very quick way to go from place to place so that you can edit what you need to edit. If you liked the draw functionality, then you're probably going to like the gallery as well. The OpenOffice gallery can be clicked right here, right to the next of Navigator. There's no hotkey shortcut for it, but what the gallery has is a whole bunch of different clip art that you can actually include in your documents. So you don't have to draw everything you want. If you want an arrow, there are plenty of arrows for you, and there are different categories of these little clip art pieces that you can include inside of your document, which could be great if you're doing something like a flyer, for instance. And all you need to do to use any of these icons is simply to drag them onto your document where you want them. And you can anchor it, you can move it around, and essentially just get it to how you want it to appear on your document. You'll also notice that when you have clip art inside of your document, that it will automatically open up the picture toolbar for you to make some edits and changes to that picture and its appearance. Further on, we have the Data Sources window, which we can bring up by hitting F4 or clicking on the standard toolbar icon. Now, for any databases which you had connected to OpenOffice Writer, you would be able to see them here and actually be able to find records within the databases and sort the tables as you go exploring them. And if you found any information that you wanted to include in OpenOffice, you could do so simply by actually clicking on a column or clicking on a cell, dragging it into the document, and letting go. And this functionality, being able to include database information, would be very useful if you actually wanted to include part of a table within OpenOffice Writer. And this isn't something most people really need to work with, but for instance, if you wanted to select the whole table and actually include part of it inside of OpenOffice, you just left-click at the top left to select everything, drag it into your document, and then you can choose the different columns you actually want to include. We could insert the data as a table and then select certain columns over from our table in the database to be a table inside of OpenOffice Writer. For instance, book title and author, then hit OK. Now, by adding the entire columns from the database, we're going to get those entire columns, author and book title, inside of our OpenOffice document. So you can see how this is a quick way to add a lot of information inside of OpenOffice Writer. However, the two caveats would be that you actually have to include the database as something you connect to, and you would actually have to have the information already in the database in order to include it here. But we'll get much more into this aspect of OpenOffice Writer in a future video. Next, as we've already played around a little bit with, we have the non-printing characters button, which can also be accessed simply by hitting Control and F10. And non-printing characters will show you invisible symbols inside of your document, which actually are important for how it displays and how it's actually formatted, but you don't see those characters because they are things like a new line or a new paragraph. The new paragraph symbol, of course, being this little guy right here. And whenever you have non-printing characters enabled, you can actually see all of those invisible characters like new paragraph. And likewise, if you turn it off, they go invisible again. Past that, we have the Zoom button, which opens up a Zoom and View layout dialog box, which gives you a lot more options for zooming into your document. You can just put a simple variable here and put 150% or something like that, but you can also choose from these other radio button selections, such as optimal or fit to screen. If you want multiple pages of your document to show at once inside of the main viewing window, you can click columns here and set the number of columns, or in other words, pages that you want to see at one time. If you wanted to see all the pages together at the same in terms of their display inside of OpenOffice Writer, you can go into book mode, which does exactly the same thing as down here, where you can just select these manually outside of the Zoom and View layout dialog box. Automatic view layout will try to give you an optimal number of pages displaying based on the size of your document, because in OpenOffice, as we'll get into when we start talking about the page window, you can actually choose different sizes of documents you want to work on, such as business cards as opposed to a standard 8.5 by 11 inch letter. And the last icon on the OpenOffice standard toolbar is OpenOffice Help. If you click that, what it's going to do is open up the program's database of information where you can search a lot of different terms, and it has some information on helping you out or explaining what each functionality does within OpenOffice. So it's very good to know, especially if you have more questions beyond what I'm talking about in these videos. So that's all for the standard toolbar for OpenOffice Writer. I know this was a bit of a long one because we delved a bit into other aspects such as the Navigator and Gallery in a little bit of depth. But in the next videos, they should be fairly easy ones because we're talking about the Find toolbar and the Formatting toolbar down here. So until the next videos, I'll see you then.